Good morning. My name is Chad Nelson. I am the Vice Chair, and I'm going to call the Planning and Zoning meeting of September 7th, 2022 to order. Would you please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. May we have the roll call, please?
Susanna Ballard. Here. David Diaz.
Here.
Joan DeZuro.
Here.
Paul Ayer.
Here.
Gabrielle Medley.
Here.
Matthew Mitchell. Dane Hatch.
Here.
Tiffany Wilson. Here. Chad Nelson.
Here.
Jim Harris.
Okay, and we'll have Mr. Hatch join us up here today. And we don't have to sign in today. The system's down. And just a reminder for members of the committee, what will be up on the screen will be here, but we'll be just voting old school today. Yays and nays. All right. So correspondence and announcements from staff, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. As you mentioned, there are some technical difficulties with the vote cast system, so we'll go with the voice votes and motions at this point. The previous City Council meeting on August 23rd, they approved the rezone for the El Camino Drive property, so that rezone was approved by City Council. That concludes staff's correspondence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morris. And minutes from the previous meeting, are there any additions, deletions, or corrections? Can I get a motion to approve?
I make a motion we approve the minutes as presented.
We have a motion from Ms. Ballard. Do we have a second?
I second.
Second from Mr. Diaz. And let's call for the question.
Ms. Ballard.
Yes.
Mr. Diaz.
Yes.
Ms. DeZuro.
Yes.
Mr. Lair.
Yes.
Ms. Medley.
Yes.
Mr. Hatch.
Yes.
And Mr. Nelson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, this is a public hearing. The structure of this meeting will allow the staff to present an item. The commission may ask staff questions, and then the applicant will have an opportunity to present. Commissioners may have questions for the applicant, and then I will open the discussion to the audience. We ask that if you would like to address the commission, please do so, but there is a limit of 1 trip to the podium per topic and 3 minutes to speak. Please spell your last name for the record. I will then close the discussion and bring the item back to staff and ask for their recommendation. The commission will then hear a motion, discuss, and make a recommendation to the City Council for their final consideration. All right, so the first item is ID 22-3447, a request for preliminary subdivision plat for Gage Industrial Park at 1101 Gage Drive, tract 2308C, Block 2, Lot 1, creating an 8-unit commercial condominium subdivision in the light industrial district. And I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. The subject property is located on Gage Drive between College Drive and Centers Avenue. The properties to the north, south, east, and west are zoned light industrial and developed for industrial uses. The site is currently developed as an 8-unit industrial complex that was built in 1990. The proposed condominium plat will convert the units into condominiums and allow them to be individual owned and included as partners association along with the common portions of the development. The project includes 8 industrial units, and parcel I is a common shared area. The project will have a property owners association to manage and maintain the association improvements. The common area will be privately owned, and the water and wastewater within the subdivision is installed and maintained by the association. This concludes staff's presentation. We are available for any questions. Thank you.
Is there any questions of staff? All right, is the applicant present? And if so, would you like to make a presentation?
I have a question.
All right, please approach the podium. The commission has a few questions. And please spell your last name for the record. Thank you.
My name is Maggie Aku, and I represent Sandland and Associates. We are civil engineers and land surveyors.
Okay, Mr. Diaz?
Yeah, just a quick question, just to get it on the record for clarification, because if people have asked me, could just clarify, and maybe staff could assist, what a commercial condominium subdivision, what a commercial condominium is. I know what it is, but just to get it out on the record, because people have questions about exactly what does that mean.
Well, thank you for the question. A commercial condominium is very similar to a residential condominium. It's just different ownership, type of ownership of a building or a portion of a building. So in this case, this is one large industrial commercial building. They're proposing to chop it up into individual pieces to parcel it out to be able to sell them off individually, much as you think of a residential condominium association. It's the same concept, but just for commercial purposes. Thank you.
And my only question to the applicant is each parcel has its own bathroom, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any other discussion? Okay, we'll bring it back to staff for recommendation.
Based on the findings, the Development Review Committee recommends approval of Land Use Action 22-3447, a preliminary subdivision plat for Gage Industrial Park at 1101 Gage Drive, Tract 2308C, Block 2, Lot 1, creating an 8-unit commercial condominium subdivision in the Light Industrial District.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and or a motion.
I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve Land Use Action 22-3447, a preliminary subdivision plat for Gage Industrial Park at 1101 Gage Drive, Tract 2308C, Block 2, Lot 1, creating an 8-unit commercial condominium subdivision in the Light Industrial District.
Okay, Ms. Ballard has made a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. DeZuro seconds the motion. Let's call for the question.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. DeZuro?
Yes.
Mr. Lair?
Yes.
Ms. Medley?
Yes.
Mr. Hatch?
Yes.
And Mr. Nelson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, we have our next item, which is ID 22-3441. And this is a request to amend the parking and common master plan for 3135, 3137, 3139, and 3141 Maricopa Avenue, Tract 2257, Block 8, Lot 16, 17, 18, and 19, removing the property from the master plan. And we'll turn it over to Mr. Morris.
Vice Chair and Commissioners, thank you so much. Subject properties are located on Maricopa Avenue between Melrose and Arapahoe Drives. An alley abuts the rear of the properties, and Highway 95 is to the south across Maricopa Avenue. The subject properties in the abutting lots to the west and east are zoned Commercial Southgate District and developed as commercial uses and some vacant lots. The properties to the north across the alley are zoned RSGD Residential Southgate, and they're a mix of vacant lots and residential development. Here's the master common and parking plan. The original plan for Block 8 includes lots 12 through 29, which are from Melrose Drive down to where the wash is. The lots in this deep are about 250 feet deep. The parking plan calls for a 10-foot landscape buffer along Maricopa Avenue, and then a 90-foot building area, a building setback area, and then the rear 20-foot parking from the alley, resulting in a buildable building depth of 140 feet. Recently, some lots have been removed. Other properties in the block have already been removed from the master parking and common plan. Lot 12 here on the corner on Melrose was removed from the plan in 2015 to allow outdoor display of some RV vehicle display in that area. And then the Havasu Preparatory Academy on lots 22 through 27 were removed in 2002 as part of that school development. Here's an aerial with the parking and common plan overlaid with it. The westernmost subject lots, so the subject lots here in red, the westernmost two of those lots, lots 16 and 17, are currently used for outdoor storage as approved from a conditional use permit in 1999. And then the easternmost two lots of the subject property are home to a landscaping nursery use that was permitted in 1991. The applicant's letter of intent requests to amend the master plan by removing the 4 subject lots from the plan to allow outdoor display and provide the required future parking for future development. The owners have no specific redevelopment plans at this point. An advantage of being included in the master parking plan is that development and redevelopment only need to comply with the master plan for parking rather than the parking requirements outlined in the development code. However, all users within that parking and common block are supposed to share that parking with no spaces being reserved for any one business or use. So they're asking to be removed from that. If removed from that plan, then all of the required parking for any proposed uses of these properties shall be provided on the subject lots, and the spaces may be reserved for their customers and their employees. Use of other parking and common areas and other lots would not be allowed for these businesses. Any new structure will still be limited to the middle 140-foot building area as shown on the master parking plan. The parking and common amendment application requires initial agreement of minimum 75% of the property owners within the block. The applicant submitted approvals from 7 of the 9 property owners, which is 78% within the block, which meets that standard. Staff finds that the approval of the request will have a negligible impact on the master parking plan for the area and will not result in the properties becoming non-conforming regarding required off-site parking or on-site parking. Staff further finds that approval of the amendment will not increase the traffic congestion on nearby streets or any other property containing a residential land use within 300 feet of the included properties. As a reminder, design review for development code compliance, including driveways and parking requirements, will be required prior to development before building permits are issued for the properties. That concludes staff's presentation. Open for any questions. The applicants are also in the audience. Thank you.
Is there any questions of staff?
I have a question. In allowing for this, it would leave lot 20. What would the access from the roadway be to lot 20? Would there be a separate access?
I'll go back to the aerial here. So lot 20, I believe, is vacant lot here. It could have a separate access. If the past master parking plan, we would try to utilize any existing driveways. So there could be, if this lot 20, the vacant lot, was developed, we would like to have the parking plan go across, use this existing driveway of the lot to the east here, go across that city parcel and do improvements here. We try to limit the number of driveways. That's part of one of the reasons for master plans on some of these parking and common plans. So if that developed, we would see if we can get them to develop the property, their parking area, so that connects to existing driveways, the driveway to the east here.
Would that then require an easement granted to the owner of Lot 20 to cross the city property?
And that may be something that we could look into. Yeah, it would typically be something we would give permission for something like that. So it could be a
And-
possibility.
Whose responsibility would it be to obtain that easement?
Well, it would typically be the property developer. We would work with them. If that wasn't feasible, then they would have to be allowed their own driveway, separate driveway.
Thank you.
My question is, if you could explain to, the general public and to the commission what that city parcel is, and what its use is, and what the future intention is for that city parcel.
Certainly. The city parcel is one of a number of parcels in that area, and there's even some on McCulloch Boulevard. Their connection, their pedestrian access ways from the front to the rear of those lots, and they were put in place when that subdivision was formed for that purpose, to provide access from the back to the front, the alley to the front of those properties. And they're spaced throughout a number of blocks in the area there in Maricopa area there.
Does the city plan on improving that piece?
I don't know of any long-term plans for improvements on that. In fact, city has been open to people requesting purchase of some of those, for offering them for sale to the adjacent property owners. So I don't think the city has any long-term plans for these sort of improvements there.
Any other questions of staff?
I have a question. So on the site plan, it shows only a limited number of parking spaces. And is there a requirement to have more than what is already on their sketch or site plan?
The requirement for the parking will be based on the proposed uses of the properties once they're developed, and they'll be reviewed for all compliance with the development code, landscaping, parking, drainage, building codes, all that as part of when it's developed. So what they're showing on the plan is conceptual. They don't have any specific plans for those properties right now, is my understanding.
Yeah, Dane, I would recommend checking out the general plan and going through that for commercial parking requirements. Commercial parking requirements are like more minimal than you might think. We had a car wash that came through one time. I think the requirement was like one parking space. So commercial is pretty interesting. Okay, is the applicant present, and would you like to make a presentation? Does anybody have any questions of the applicant? Okay, hearing none, then we will bring it back to staff for recommendation, and then we will go to discussion and or a motion.
Thank you, Vice Chairman, Commissioners. Based on the findings, Development Review Committee recommends approval of Land Use Action Number 22-3441, an amendment to the Parking and Common Master Plan for 3135, 3137, 3139, and 3141 Maricopa Avenue, Tract 2257, Block 8, Lots 16, 17, 18, and 19, removing the properties from the master plan with the following condition. A design review to ensure compliance with all applicable city codes, including driveway locations and parking, is required prior to development of the properties. Thank you.
All right, so I'd like to bring it back to discussion for real quick. And in the spirit of Don Bergen, the signs were blown down, but I don't know anything that wasn't blown down. Power lines were blown down, roofs were blown, houses were blown down. It was pretty crazy winds.
And Mr. Vice Chair, if I may interrupt, excuse me.
Yeah.
We may have overlooked opening this to the comment, or any of the comments from or questions from the public.
Oh, yeah. Is there any questions of public? Thank you. Anybody that would like to approach the podium? Okay, hearing none. We will go back to discussion. And I did want to make a suggestion, just thinking about Dawn, maybe thinking about some pound in the ground signs, since it's pretty windy in some areas, particularly South Side, Island, stuff like that. There could be situations where a pound in the ground sign would be good. Just a suggestion. I did have one item of discussion that I wanted to bring up. Visiting the site, I think that I don't have any issues with with any of this except for lot 19. I think going over to lot 20, like Ms. Ballard had mentioned, it's going to be challenging to get in there, turn around, and come out. And that city parcel is not improved. So if you're in a Prius or a Tesla, you're not going to drive in the dirt to turn around. So I can't make a motion, but I don't really like lot 19, which is the lot all the way to the right next to lot 20 being removed. The other three, I don't really have an issue with. Is there any other discussion or questions of staff or a motion?
Well, I, again, have a little bit of issue with ingress and egress to lot number 20, being that it would be, even though crossing the city parcel is not improved, even with a, making some kind of recommendation to augment that. I'm concerned about what the value will be to lot number 20 with limited parking and limited access. I believe at the least amount, I think that a driveway or some access should be provided to lot 20 to allow them ingress and egress and maybe solve that problem.
I'd like to allow the applicant to approach the podium. And if you could please come up to the podium and answer that question.
Abner Schultz, those lots can all be approached from the back alley. I don't foresee a problem getting in and out.
Except for customer access. The customer accessing anything on that property would not want to access it from the rear alley. They'd want to be able to come in from the street.
Is it not open like all the rest?
Well, if you restrict the parking and use eliminate the parking in common, that leaves lot 20 with no access to their property.
Suppose those lots were all individually owned. What would the access be then?
There is access provided along Maricopa Avenue at intervals to access the parking in common area now.
Would intervals work for individual lot owners? You know, there could be a dozen lot owners in there. So what would their access be then?
Well, lot 20 would have no access if you remove the parking in common from your 4 lots.
Supposing I sold one lot to someone else, what would the access be then?
There would still be no access. If we eliminate the parking in common for those 4 properties, it still leaves lot number 20 with no access, street access to their property.
So what happens to all the lots and lot owners down the rest of the street?
If there's parking in common in front of the lots, then they have access through parking in common. But I don't see where if you decided to remove the parking in common, if you decided to fence this area to use the front for outside display or something, there would be no way except through the alley to access lot number 20.
Should there be a problem with that?
Well, that's what the city needs to decide.
Can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I know this area. I've actually been to that. Is this where the nursery's at right now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this area is in dire need of development. It looks pretty shabby down there. I think we're kind of jumping the gun on blocking this because of the lot 20. I think as Mr. Morris had mentioned, those design reviews and egress and so forth will be discussed and approved upon and voted upon by us and the city council when that time comes. I don't think it's an issue personally. I think I agree with the gentleman saying about the individual lots and getting in and out of them right now. So what if it was just one big lot and he had already fenced it in to be the same situation? So I think we're kind of jumping the gun on that. I don't see an issue with it, and I think it's a good thing to have it to get the parking in common removed do what is going to be approved here, hopefully, and then down the road, those things will come up and they'll either be approved or not approved. But that's
Thank
my
you.
opinion.
One more question. So is there a plan to do any improvement on these
Not at
properties?
this point. It's been nursery before I bought the ground, and it still is a nursery, so I don't
So there's
foresee
not any
change.
improvement that's going to be happening.
Right now, right.
So,
Would the property be fenced?
Well, it would
To-
have
to
to,
the
because
street?
with the nursery, they could carry plants off.
Mr. Vice Chair.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the way this, I drove by it, but I was just wanting to make sure. Right now, the only entrance is down but between Melrose and Maricopa, and that's the way in, and then everybody goes up through the buildings at that time, right?
well, currently, I think the nursery has some landscaping all the way down by the street. And the parking in common kind of has a drive that goes through the center. So right now, you know, the parcel on lot 20 is just kind of like open storage right now.
Right.
And I think the issue is that these lots are only 50 feet wide. So if you take out the parking in common, you know, now depending on the commercial property, if it's like they could develop a CPA office there and you might only need 3 parking spaces.
Right.
But if it's a commercial, it could also be like a little convenience store, you know, and in that situation, you might have a lot of people coming in and out, and that 50 feet wide of access could be congested. So, you know, our goal is never to hinder anybody from, you know, developing, but just to make good decisions. So down the road, you know, people don't question the owner of the property or planning and zoning for the decisions that were passed on to city council.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Just a little more information about parking in common. These plans were put together years ago with a basically conceptual plan when the lots weren't developed, and some lots have developed since then. And in those locations where there are no driveways shown on the master parking plan, we allow the developer of that property to put a driveway in to serve their property. We don't limit it. We don't say you cannot do a driveway because it's not shown on the plan. Because if the lots next to it aren't developed, then there's no access to their plan because there's no shared driveway, improved driveways, or maneuvering rooms, travel aisles. So we do allow driveways on a lot-by-lot basis. It would be reviewed to make sure it complies with the development code and any access requirements for driveways. So I don't want you to feel like this plan is carved in stone. It's something that does change. It is the master plan, but situations change throughout the years. And this is one example of someone trying to remove it to help develop the properties. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Just another quick question, follow up on what Chad said. If you isolate lot 20 and you require them to put a driveway into their property at 25 feet wide, they now have 25-foot parking because you have setbacks on these properties. So you could not develop any kind of a business that would require more than 3 parking spaces. Is that correct?
They would be still part of the parking in common plan. So they
But
would
with
have,
no access?
they could have their own driveway from the street onto lot 20 and still be part of that parking in common plan. And currently the business here, it meets even if with the removal of these parking spaces, this request, they're still meeting their on-site demands for parking as it is. And they're still part of the parking in common plan. So again, one of the benefits of the parking in common is regardless of how many parking spaces they can actually physically fit on their property, if they're part of that parking in common plan, that's all they need to do. Match this plan as closely as possible, and they don't have to worry about any additional parking.
As long as that parking in common includes passing over city property, which it doesn't look like to me on the map is included in the parking in common.
This parking in common plan, this master plan for these areas typically showed the city parcel as being the main driveway into these areas. Obviously, it hasn't developed that way, and so we allow some flexibility in the development of these properties, so we can use an existing driveway in place of what's shown there as the main driveway. So the city would try to work with someone, with them if they're trying to develop that vacant lot 20, if there's a way to get that access or that pavement across that city parcel. It's a process. It could be done. I'm not saying it's going to be done, but it's a possibility. And so in worst case, if it didn't happen, then they would still be able to provide their own driveway on lot 20 by itself.
Yeah, thank you.
Do we have any other questions of the applicant?
I got a quick question. On these 4 lots, do you intend to marry these lots together? So instead of, 50-50-50, you'd have one big lot? Or say 2?
Possibly, I haven't thought of it. They were just individually purchased, and at this point, they're just planning on leaving things the way they were.
If, another quick question, if the applicant intends to marry them, is that going to affect parking or what is currently on for the site plan here?
Well, they're individual lots. They're not married. So if we pass this, each individual lot could be fenced off. And they would have to go through the city to, there would be some landscaping requirements, some access requirements. If that was done, they would have to improve the access to get any type of building permit, if I'm correct.
And they would have to go through a full design review and permitting process, including access driveways, parking, landscaping, building permit requirements. So, yes.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have another question of staff and maybe Mr. Tuneman. Or Ms. Gary, I'm not sure who to approach on this question. But at this point, we get down to, lot 20 and lot 21 where they're basically a little island of common parking. And at this point, can we just remove everything from Melrose to Arapahoe?
Well, that's slowly how things seem to be evolving, especially in this block. You mean remove the parking and common master plan?
Yes.
That's a possibility. What it is, though, the way the process works at this point, it's the plan's in place. It was approved by Planning Commission years ago. Amendments to that plan go through this process. So let's say the remaining property owners here that are part of the parking and common plan got together and say, hey, we want to remove the rest of our properties from this plan. They could go through that process. If the Planning Commission wants to maybe direct staff to do something else to re-examine the parking and common in this area, and you want to go through maybe a process to remove it, that's something you could direct staff to start on. It's something that we could look at. But the normal process, once the plan's adopted, as it is here, is to go through this parking and common amendment procedure.
I'd like to hear a motion, and depending on that motion, maybe discuss that option.
Well, I think that the request now is for this.
Correct.
For this.
Yeah.
So if you want to deal with this and then move on, if you want
Exactly.
a direction or something, okay.
Yeah, deal with this item, and then depending on the outcome of that item, maybe talk about something.
I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve land use action number 22-3441, an amendment to the parking and common master plan for 3135, 3137, 3139, and 3141 Maricopa Avenue, tract 2257, block 8, lot 16, 17, 18, and 19, removing the properties from the master plan with the following conditions. Design review to ensure compliance with all applicable city codes, including driveway locations and parking, is required prior to development of the property.
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Ballard. Do we have a second or discussion?
I'll second.
And we have a second by Mr. Lair. Any other discussion? All right, let's call for the question.
Ms. Ballard?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz,
Yes.
Ms. DeZero,
Yes.
Mr. Lair,
Yes.
Ms. Medley,
Yes.
Mr. Hatch,
Yes.
and Mr. Nelson.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0.
All right. With that being said, before we go to the call of the public, can we make a recommendation to remove the parking common from Melrose to Arapahoe?
Mr. Chair, you can't take any motion on that or give a direction. If you want staff to do some research and bring it back for the board to consider at a later date, that would be okay. I don't know that there's going to be a mechanism. I know Mr. Morris said it may be something that you can do, but there isn't currently a legal mechanism for you as the commission to remove somebody from the parking in common or to just do away with the parking in common plan. Obviously, there are lots in there that enjoy the benefits of being a part of parking in common and may not be ready to consider whether or not they're going to develop or not and what parking needs they might have. And so you'd be forcing their hand at this point in time if you wanted to remove the parking in common master plan from the entire block. We can't discuss it now, so I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. You can certainly request staff to bring it back with some additional information, but we can't take any direction or motion to do an action today. But we can certainly discuss it at a later date.
Right. Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that we make a motion. I'm suggesting that we look into it. And at this portion of the meeting, we have a call to the public. Would anyone like to approach the podium and ask the commission or recommend anything to the commission? We can't answer any questions, but if you'd like to approach the podium, you're welcome to at this point. Hearing none, we'll go to future meetings. Mr. Morris.
Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioners, thank you. The September 21st meeting is canceled. The meeting room is unavailable. So the next regular meeting will be October 5th.
Okay, and we stand adjourned. Thank you.